Hey guys, Foxdrop here with the video on the best junglers for solo queue right now in the current patch, patch 7.6. With every patch there are new buffs, there are new nerfs, and the meta shifts, so it's unsurprising that the best junglers also shift. Some of these will be the same as from last patch. Obviously there aren't miracles happening. However, there are some new people on this list that I want to talk about, so let's go right ahead and crack on with it. So the first champion we're going to talk about today is the one and only Shaco. I really enjoy talking about Shaco in my videos because I know I can always look forward to at least 500 different comments of people telling me that I'm pronouncing Shaco wrong. But regardless of how you pronounce Shaco or Shaco or Shiki or Schnacky or whatever the bloody hell you want to say, Shaco is inarguably one of the strongest junglers in the current patch. To be perfectly honest, if we're thinking about the best junglers throughout the whole of Season 7, I think you're hard pressed to bump Shaco out of a top 5. Especially as far as statistical win rates go. Shaco's always been in the top 3, top 5. Nothing seems to bring him down. And perhaps the most ridiculous thing about Shaco this season is that he has had more different item builds than Fire has had elo boosts. And that's saying a lot. Firstly, we had AP Shaco, then we had Tank Shaco, then recently we had Lethality Shaco, and now we have this Bruiser Triforce Shaco. I mean, first things first, I should just clarify that you can build whatever the bloody hell you want on Shaco and you'll still be effective. But right now, the flavor of the month seems to be this Bruiser Triforce that we talked about, where you get Triforce and something like Ravenous Hydra. You end up being a pretty bloody tanky, thanks to stuff like Ninja Tabby, you just can't die anyway. But you still pack quite a punch, which enables you to clear the jungle pretty fast, to split push as well if you want to, especially if you go Titanic Hydra, because that's really good for split pushing. And then you can also act as a really good assassin, because AD carries specifically, they can't deal with you. If you jump on them, you'll probably kill them. And by design, Shaco is one of the best ganking junglers in the game as well. Pretty good at dueling too, so his early game pressure is really high. And considering in solo queue it's very often win lane, win game, early game pressure is a really valuable commodity. For your runes and masteries, you'll want to take something like this. And for your item build, rush Tiamat even before your jungle item, then get Triforce and then build it into a Titanic Hydra, and after that just get tanky. As far as actually playing Shaco and how to do that, for me it all begins at level 1 with what you do on your first opening jungle clear. Because Shaco is very unique in the sense that he can stack boxes, which essentially means he can take one camp if he stacks all his boxes on that camp for free instantly. Now whether or not you want to do that and then perhaps go and invade the enemy jungle, or maybe you want to spread your boxes out and go for a faster level 3, there's a lot of different stuff you can do, so I would recommend either just playing around with it or perhaps watching some videos on YouTube that go into more detail. But either way, like I mentioned, you have a lot of early game pressure, so make sure you're ganking all the time. You do want to be prioritizing ganking and invading and controlling the early game over just farming. But having said that, Shaco's late game really isn't that bad, so if in doubt, taking a jungle camp certainly won't kill you. Unless, you know, it's like the chickens and you're level 1 and you haven't skilled an ability, that might kill you. But more or less, if you know you're safe with it, you should be fine. As the game progresses and you start moving out of lane phase, anytime you're doing any skirmishes, you want to make sure that you're positioning yourself so the enemy team doesn't see you initially. That way you can deceive into the fight and catch the enemy carry, the enemy squishy, out of position, off guard, and burst them down. Same goes for those late game team fights as well, but you can also opt to do some more split pushing to pressure the game that way. For example, you can put some pressure on a side lane, push that down, go for the towers, and if the enemy team sends people for you, maybe threaten an objective with your team. But that's enough about Shaco. I think you got a good idea of how to play him. Moving on to our second champion for this list, Ivern. Similar to Shaco, Ivern's someone whose win rate has been pretty much top notch ever since Season 7 came out. Ivern excels at controlling the early game, specifically controlling the enemy jungle. He takes away stuff right under the enemy jungle's nose and makes it really limited in what he can get out of his own jungle. It then means that the enemy jungler has to be making a lot of plays on the lanes, and if those don't work, he's usually pretty screwed. Outside of his unique playstyle, he is an extremely effective jungler. He plays more of like a support in the jungle, not even like a supporty jungler, just genuinely a support in the jungle. But I also personally find that picking Ivern into team comps where your team has some really good late game carries or some hyper carries. So these are champions that are really good once they get a few items, champions that can just like solo carry a game if they don't die. So things like Caitlyn or Kog'Maw, maybe Yasuo, even people like Jax and Irelia. If you pick Ivern when you have those kind of people on your team, it's really good combo because you can protect them extremely well. And for me as well, personally, what I quite like about Ivern is that it moves the responsibility of carrying from you onto your teammates. Now, normally that is a terrible idea to do in solo queue, right? You want to have the best tools to carry for you yourself because your teammates are monkeys. Now, whether or not that's actually true or not, that's, that's the general philosophy for solo queue. But what I find with Ivern and how this can actually work as a strategy with him is because not only do you put the enemy jungler really far behind, so he has much less impact himself, but if you do protect your team as hard as Ivern protects teammates, it's actually quite easy for them to carry. Anyway, here are the runes and masteries that you want to run on Ivern. And for item build, what I find to work really well is to rush the Chalice, then get CDR boots, then finish Athene's, Redemption, Locket, and just build support items after that. As for how you play Ivern though, in the early game, you want to be counter jungling as much as possible, especially when your smite's up, you take things away instantly. Your ganks are actually really good as well, so you can definitely influence the game from the very get-go. And then after that, just play like a protective support. If you can land the snares on people jumping onto your teammates, shield your teammates as well, and then when you whip out Daisy and she just runs amok in the enemy team, it's really hard to play against an Ivern. And to be honest, that's all there is to say about playing Ivern. Like, there's no in-depth strategy. You're the Peter Crouch to the jungle, and you're a support. That's all there is to know. Before we move on to the third champion for this list, guys, I just want to quickly ask you a question which I'm sure you guys were begging me to talk about. Well, maybe not quite as excited as I am about it, but still I've opened up a storefront where you guys can buy some swaggy Foxdrop merch. I'll put a link to it down below in the description. But anyway, moving on. The next champion we'll talk about here is a really obvious one, and I won't talk about him too much because he's been strong for quite a while now. It's Graves. Now, I'm still a little bit salty that Graves has become such a strong jungler recently because I put in a lot of time getting good at Graves. I thought I'd turn him into my one trick, and then the next patch, suddenly he's OP. But anyway, putting my saltiness aside, the reason why Graves is such a strong jungler in this current meta mostly comes down to the fact that he can go toe-to-toe with anyone and come out ahead. His jungle clears are pretty fast, but more specifically, his bullying and his early pressure is unmatched. If you're playing Graves and you want to do something in that early game, you can do something in that early game. Now, Graves is by far and away not the only person you can do early game stuff with. Elise has better ganks. Shaco's more well-rounded, arguably, in the early game. Lee Sin has a better level 6 power spike. But none of those champions really scale as well as Graves does, because at the end of the game, if you just buy loads of damage items, you'll be in a position where you can pretty much one-shot the enemy carry regardless. Like, you're really strong in the early game and you don't particularly fall off either. It can be a little bit hard to play him in the mid and late game and in those team fights because you're quite low range, and if you're not careful, you can get blown up. But more or less with some practice, you'll be fine. Here are your runes and masteries for Graves jungle. And for your item build, go Red Smite, Warrior Enchant, Berserker Greaves, and then more or less just buy any damage item you want to buy. Quite a popular build is going Black Cleaver into Phantom Dancer, but to be honest, as long as it gives you damage, then you can buy it on Graves. The fourth jungler for this list we'll talk about today is Nunu. Now, I'm always really sad when Nunu comes into the meta, and Nunu right now isn't like really popular. Like, not too many people pick him, but I do think that as far as pure strength goes, you probably have to stick him in the top 5. Maybe I'm talking a bit too much as far as like potential goes here, because like I say, he's not too popular, right? So he's not 100% in the jungle meta just yet. But really, if nothing changes at least, I can see this guy being picked up a lot, and that makes me really sad. Kind of one of those champions where it feels like there's little counterplay to him, and if you're being suffocated by Nunu, which isn't too rare of an occurrence, it's one of the more frustrating experiences you can have in League. But anyway, I talked a bit more about Nunu in my previous upcoming junglers video that I did like a week ago or so I won't go into too much detail here. But here are your runes, here are your masteries, and for your item build, just get tanky. If it has CDR on it, then that's even better, but check out that video I did before for more information. But anyway, let's move on to the last jungler on this list, or really should I say junglers, because there is no fifth jungler for me to put in this slot. There's so many strong junglers right now that I could put in this fifth slot who I feel like are all as strong as each other. So I'm just going to list off all the champions who I think could fill this number 5 spot. So I think you could stick in Kindred, Warwick, Xin Zhao, Elise, Lee Sin, Vi, Eve, Olaf, Hecarim, Kha'Zix, or Rengar. And to be honest, there are loads of other junglers that you could also put really close to these people, like, you know, Rek'Sai or Zac or Gragas or Nocturne. There's just so many decent junglers around right now. But anyway, that's all I want to say for this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know what you thought about it down below in the comments. And like I say, you can subscribe to me for more League of Legends stuff, and you can also find me on Facebook. You can find me on Twitter, and catch me streaming at twitch.tv/Foxdrop. All those links are found down below in the description. Also, if you're wondering why my voice suddenly sounded really weird going into halfway through this video, it's because I actually fell asleep halfway through, and so here I am post-nap, running out of time doing the voiceover. But still, thanks for watching, guys. Have a good one, and I will see you in my next video.